You know those moments when you scroll through Instagram, see someone's beautiful gallery or thriving studio practice, and think to yourself, man, I wish I could be there instead of where I am at right now. Frankly, I've caught myself thinking about this more times than I'd like to admit, looking at other makers' current success without remembering the years of evolution and change that actually brought them to that point. In fact, it's pretty much entirely why I started this podcast in the first place. I knew from my own experience starting a photography business that the reality didn't always match the internet. Today's conversation with AnnMarie Cooper, a potter and a gallery owner, peels back those layers to reveal what we don't usually see on social media. What intrigues me about AnnMarie's story isn't just where she is now, but all the iterations that came before. Iterations that I would argue were absolutely necessary to work through in order to get to where she actually is today. We get into the many facets of this evolution in our conversation, from how AnnMarie transitioned from being an employee to the gallery owner, to why she eventually moved her studio out of her home to create better boundaries, to the critical importance of building community, both locally and internationally. She reminds us that the polished final product we see in someone's career is built on countless decisions, adjustments, and even reversals that happened along the way. Whether you're just starting out or several years into your making journey, I hope this conversation helps you see that the makers you admire didn't spring fully formed into their current state. Their journey, like mine and yours, has been full of iterations, experiments, and gradual evolution. So let's dig into this conversation about the hidden transitions behind creative success, the permission to evolve your practice alongside your life, and the community connections that sustain us through each phase of growth, right after this brief word from our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by The Community. With now over 100 makers from all over the world, The Community is where you can dive deeper into any topics we started talking about here on the podcast. Whether it's the debate back on episode 509 about choosing between Etsy or your own website, or trying to sort out what type of side hustle or full-time business works for your own personal life after hearing so many different stories here on the podcast. If you've been listening along and finding yourself wishing for more at the end of an episode, The Community is that more. Learn about more of the perks of membership by visiting makersplaybook.com/community, or send me a message and I can put you in touch with one of our members to get an insider's perspective. Now, on with the show. Welcome to the Maker's Playbook, the show where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, seasoned entrepreneur of 14 years, Rebecca Ikes Cara. Hey, AnnMarie, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
And of course, as soon as I said that, normally I make people say their own name out loud on the record for myself before I say hello. And I didn't do that this time. And I was like, I'm pretty sure it's both names. I feel confident it's both.
It is, yes. AnnMarie or Annie.
Oh.
Never just Ann.
Is it for you, though, like, there's people in my life that call me Becca, but only if they've known me since, like, the 90s? Is Annie that way for you?
Well, a lot of people who knew me when I was younger call me Annie, and then all my Instagram followers call me Annie.
Oh, just because your handle.
Because my handle is Annie O'Clair.
See, this is a good tactic because then, you know, if somebody actually writes you saying AnnMarie, they know you on some level. They've done their research, perhaps.
Right.
Except also now everybody listening to this will know, so I guess it'll be less. It's less of a secret. I'm going to shut up and let you introduce yourself before I just keep talking about nicknames, which would be very off book for the sake of this podcast.
I feel like I should start calling you Becca.
I mean, you know, it'll feel weird, but you can do it.
Okay, I'll introduce myself. My name is AnnMarie Cooper. I am a potter who lives in Bellingham, Washington. I own a gallery, Good Earth Pottery, and I manage the Cohorts.art craft mentorship program.
You just have a few things going on.
Just a few. And I just started this shared studio space, which I'm sitting in right now. Starflower Studio.
I didn't even know about that when I asked you to come on the podcast. So is the new shared space in the same area as the gallery? Geographically, what are we talking about here?
It's in the downtown part of Bellingham, so it's about 5 miles from the gallery. It's closer to my home, so I can actually walk here.
Nice. Have you always been in Bellingham?
No, I grew up in Edmonds, north of Seattle, and I went to Western Washington University in the 90s and then moved away and then kept coming back, and then we decided in 2009 to come back and raise our kids here.
All right, this is where it gets very obvious that I don't do research before I interview people because, in part on purpose, so that I can be the person to ask the dumb questions that, not dumb, the questions somebody else is thinking that maybe if I had done research, I would forget to ask because it feels obvious. I had no idea you, one, had a partner and two, had children.
That's because I keep my personal life off of my social media. Yes, my husband and I are just about to celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary on the day that I leave for Nsika.
Naturally, in true Potter fashion. Well, so how then, because I guess my big jumping straight into it, because I have some family friends that moved from my little hometown when they retired to Bellingham. My mom has visited. I've heard amazing things. But my big question from the beginning was how the heck you make that work? Because the West Coast is not exactly the cheapest place to be a potter or to make a living. And I was like, how do you have all just the physical spaces in Bellingham and like do all of this? It sounded like it's a super supportive arts community, but nonetheless, it's having a gallery space is hard in the cheapest of places, let alone, the Seattle area and what it has become and is becoming.
Yeah, it is challenging. I am very fortunate that Good Earth Pottery, the gallery that I own, has been around since 1969, and it's in the same spot it has always been in, which is a cooperative building run by artists. So that makes the rent affordable.
Okay, tell me about how a co-op building run by artists work, because that sounds like a dream.
Yes, it's also challenging, but we all take ownership of the building. It's a stewardship. It's co-stewardship of the building. We maintain it. It was built in 1890. So it's a beautiful treasure of a building with lots of challenges. So we all have to put in our time to help take care of it. We meet monthly and talk about all the things that need to be done. So the downstairs level is my gallery and then a wood gallery, and the upstairs is all artist studios. And it's meant to be an affordable working artist space.
Got it. My next question exactly was whether or not the Good Earth Gallery is a part of all of those artists and representing, but you already just asked that. So
we don't represent the artists that are upstairs. There aren't any pottery people upstairs anymore, but there used to be. My first studio was in that building, but there's a lot of stairs. So it's not real good for carrying pottery up and down the stair.
I mean, pottery would be easier. It's the supplies that I'm like, just the clay. Oh gosh, no. That's amazing. Okay, so how did you get involved with that? Either the co-op in the first place or also then kind of becoming the next generation of ownership with the studio, rather the gallery?
So it's a funny story. When my youngest was a couple of years old, I was ready to get out into the world a little bit more. And I was just about to find a job, or I was just starting to look for a job. And the owner at the time, I knew from a long time ago. And she had heard that I had moved to town and contacted my old boss and asked for my contact information and offered me a job right at the time that I was starting to apply places. And I wasn't a potter, but I used to manage a gallery somewhere else, and I managed her work in that gallery. So she knew I had the gallery experience. So she hired me for my experience in sales and marketing and all that. And then everything just went from there. I'd always wanted to do clay. I did a little bit in high school and then never got the chance again until, 15 years later. And then I started taking classes at the local community college, and clay took over my whole life.
As it's been known to do.
And then when the owner who hired me decided to retire, she sold me her shares of the business. And then her business partner stayed on as my partner for a couple of years. And then she retired and sold me her share of the business. So now I'm the sole owner of the business.
Is this the first time it's been one person that's owned the gallery?
No, many years ago, it was one person. So it started out as an actual co-op gallery. And then it was privatized in the 70s and owned by a couple. And they sold it to an individual who then sold it to another individual who took on a whole bunch of partners for a while, but that didn't work out. Yeah, it's gone through all sorts of changes, but now it's me and my 4 fabulous employees.
Which makes it like doubly amazing because number one, to just keep a business up and running for that many decades at this point and all of the change that comes with that in terms of economically or in terms of what's selling and what's popular and what's not popular. Like that alone to me is incredible. But then also to have that many different iterations of what it actually looked like. It's not like, I guess, in my brain, it seems easier that if it was always a partnership where, you kind of have this leapfrog effect if someone's always there that was there before. But to stick around for this period of time is incredible with that many shifts, too.
Mhm. Well, the nice thing too about having worked there for so many years before I bought it, I knew exactly what I was getting into, and I was already doing so much of the management type stuff. It wasn't scary. It was a no-brainer as soon as I was asked if I wanted to buy in. I was like, "Yes." Just didn't even hesitate.
You didn't have to like wait, go home, have a chat. You're like, nope, done.
No, I said yes, and then I asked my husband, and then he said, "Well, yeah." So we were both on the same page with that.
And then you're like, great, because I already did it. I mean, I was totally going to ask you first. That's hilarious. So when did you bring on, were you the only staff at the time and you brought on 4 people, or when did that kind of iteration get added?
There have been other part-time employees in the past, and some of them stayed on when I bought, and then, they've moved on. So there's always been at least 2 or 3 employees in addition to the owners.
I'm curious if it's comfortable for you to kind of share a little of the inner workings of the gallery for people trying to learn, like, how do these things work? And what do you need 4 employees for? And just kind of however you want to take that operationally.
That is a good question. I have 4 employees so that I don't have to be in the gallery all the time. I love the gallery, but I wanna be a maker. I wanna be in my studio making as much as I can. I also like to teach, so I wanna be able to get out and do different things. So when I first became the sole owner, I really did it all. I had a couple employees, but I really did it all, and I was, on the verge of burning myself out, so I recognized I needed help. And my eldest daughter, she's 23 now. She's been working for me since she was 16. So she is my assistant manager, and she is there doing a lot of the things that I used to do all the time. Like she maintains the website, and she's just there and responsible. So that's why I have so many employees. I kind of lost my train of thought there for a second. But it is so I can go places and do things.
Well, otherwise, if you go to Nsika, for example, you'd have to close the gallery for a week or whatnot. This also makes it make more sense of how you can also be integral, whichever way we want to pronounce that word today, integral to like cohorts and to then the next step studio that I didn't even know about. This makes me feel slightly better that like you are getting sleep.
Some, a little bit.
Well, and also I imagine, I don't know about state of Wisconsin, and we don't need to get in the weeds on legal jargon, but are the 4 employees like part-time filling in it's kind of like a retail experience for them in terms of work, or somebody's there more often than the other, because where I'm getting at, and my brain's not doing a good job of explaining it, is managing people is a lot of work. So just because you don't have to physically be there all the time, it doesn't exactly lighten the workload necessarily. It just changes it.
That's true, but I have really good people. So I don't worry. I feel so confident with the people that I have working for me that I can go to Australia for 3.5 weeks. So I mean, that was a big deal for me to be gone that long, and it was smooth sailing, and I'm very thankful for that. Yeah, my daughter as the assistant manager is there like 4 days a week or so, 4 to 5 days a week, and my other employees are there for some they're 1 day a week, and some are there 2 days a week. And sometimes there's overlap, and sometimes they're on their own. It depends on the season, but it's nice to have flexibility.
You mentioned you had gallery experience before, but that you weren't in clay. So how did you get involved in galleries to begin with?
I just, when I was in college, I started out working at a little gift gallery that was in the mall here in Bellingham. And then after I left Bellingham, I was a bank teller for a while, moved back I was in Eastern Washington, and then I was in Western Washington again. And there's a cute little town called LaConner in Washington where the Skagit Valley Tulip Festival is. And I always loved visiting there. And I thought that'd be a fun place to work. And I love art. So I went down and found an art gallery there that needed an employee. So I got a job. And it just went from there. And several of my potters at Good Earth, who are now my really good friends, were also represented in that gallery in LaConner. So we're all related. It's very bizarre and lovely.
I love that. Well, the other part I was thinking of with having team is also, I agree with you. It makes such a huge difference. Back when I had a larger size team of like, when you find the right people, it's like gold. It's an incredible experience. but learning how to find the right people or learning how to have the right person in the right position even, sometimes you have the right person, but you have them in the wrong role for what they want. All of that I think really, I don't know. I didn't have any training in figuring that out before I was growing mine. And there's not a lot of resources out there talking about how to even sort that out and do that and make sure you've got the right people on the team to begin with. But like for me, sometimes then when you find the right people and things are so great, shout out to my past studio manager, Derek, they get offered a job that you can't tell them not to take because you're like, yes, that's a better job. It pays more. It's full time. Like, please go and take it. And thank you. He was like, hey, I was able to get this because you trained me in all these things. So like the point is to kind of like help people grow in their own path. But then you're
Absolutely.
like, damn it, I have to do it all over again.
Well, it's like my daughter, right? Eventually, she will leave me. I want her to leave me. I want her to go do what she wants to do. And she actually has a studio in the studio space that I have. She's a painter and she's becoming a tattoo artist. And eventually, she's going to do all that stuff. And it will be really sad for me, but it will also be wonderful because I want her to live her dreams.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. But also, could you make sure to stay long enough to train the next person and come in and like spot check them? Like, give us 2-month warning rather than 2-week warning. That would be great. I love it. Well, so timeline wise, when did you take over Good Earth?
I became co-owner in 2016 and full owner in 2019.
Okay. How much, I mean, okay, I'm just going to keep going down the rabbit hole of the gallery and eventually just shut me up and we'll switch gears. But I just think it's fascinating because it's also one of those things that I think a lot of people have goals of working with galleries and want to get in them because they're seen as a certain elevation of, maybe an artist is taken more seriously if they have representation, or for somebody who hates selling their work, it's seen as kind of like an option of like, well, you can go down this route. But then there's also some misnomers out there, I think, too, of like how much it costs to run a gallery, how much you actually have to like, that percentage cut that someone's seeing taken, quote unquote, taken from the price of their work being sold. But it's like, it's not like that just gets to go into like a massive profit margin for you. You've got rent to pay and
It's the rent,
all
it
of
pays
these
the
things.
employees, it pays for packaging, yeah, there's so much, and people that's something I work on a lot, trying to educate people with the reason why they have to pay the gallery commission, and that when they're selling stuff themselves, they're not making more, they're doing more work.
Yeah. We're going to say that again, just in case people were half listening, because I feel like it's so crucial to any model, whether it be a gallery, whether it be, I don't know, wholesale, consignment, whatever. You're not losing. I'm going to have you say it again because I'm not going to get the words right of however you just said it.
How did I say it? You're not
Exactly.
you're not making less when you're working with the gallery. You're not making less money, you're doing more work.
Yes. Yep. And the same is true for any other I mean, it's either time or money, right? You're going to trade one or the other. You're either going to sell it for full retail price yourself, but then you're losing all of your time, or you're going to share that sale and have more of your time.
Mhm. Yeah, and some people, they sell stuff, you know, on their own, and they sell it for less than they sell it in a gallery. Then they're undercutting themselves. They're undervaluing their own work and their time, and a lot of people don't get that.
I think it was John R. Hamilton III. Have to say the whole name. It's just one of those names. I think it was John and I who were talking where he was describing a beautiful gallery relationship that he has where it opened him up to realizing he could charge more, right? Because the owner was like, you told me it was going to be this price, but this is not worth it. It's worth this much more. I'm going to sell it for this. And then it sold. And it was like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. Thank you.
Yeah, that's definitely
Is there something with that artist gallery relationship you wish people knew?
well, I think the big part of it is what I just said, and I think some people forget that galleries work with more than one person. So,
Fair.
sometimes you don't get a response right away, or things aren't as quick as you'd like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I try. I'm very responsive. I try to, I send my checks very timely. But, I think that people forget sometimes that there's more. You're not just sitting there waiting for a customer, that there's a lot going on.
Well, describe kind of an average day. Oh, that's such a lame phrase. I don't have a better one though. Whether that maybe not a day, but a week, a month is something kind of just the average ins and outs of the gallery to give people a better picture of what that actually is like?
Well, there's lots of bookkeeping involved. And like I'll go in the morning before we open and do most of my management type stuff, bookkeeping and things so that I'm not working on my computer when the customers are in the gallery because I want to be able to focus on the customers. But yeah, there's most of our artists are local that we represent on a regular basis, but we also have guest artists. We have juried shows. So there's, scheduling appointments for artists to drop off their work or pick up their work, trade their work out, constantly moving things around, lots of dusting, vacuuming, setting up shows, setting up display windows, taking out photographs for the website, updating the website. Takes a long time. People don't realize, like Jillian, my assistant manager, she takes, 5 or 6 pictures of every item that goes on the website. And if there's 800 items on the website or more, that's a lot of pictures. So sometimes it might take a little longer to get something up on the website, but it'll get there. And we don't have everything in the gallery on the website because we have too many items, but everyone that we have in the gallery has a page and has a nice selection of their work. And then we will send, people can contact us and we'll send photos of a full display and work with customers in that way. Sometimes we FaceTime. It's a lot. But then there are days when it's quiet.
Is there seasonality with a gallery the way there is for the rest of us in terms of holiday shopping and different occasions and stuff like that? Or
December is definitely the busiest month of the year. But in the past couple of years, it's been pretty regularly steady every month, which has been really nice. This January and February were surprisingly busy for January and February. Retail therapy, perhaps. I'm not sure. But I'll take it. It was lovely. But yeah, I mean, we get a lot of tourists here in the summertime and late or early fall and then December. And so I also try to have the juried shows or special featured shows happening during months, which might be slower otherwise, but it helps bring more people in. When I started working at Good Earth, we only represented artists who lived within a 50-mile radius of Bellingham.
okay.
So when I became owner, I decided to open it up to the national ceramics community or international ceramics community too. I've got some Adriana Christensen work from Australia about ready to be released in the near future.
Ooh, nice. That's just one piece of it that I can't really wrap my brain around, just in terms of the having to ship all of your stuff somewhere and then, you guys having to pack up whatever doesn't sell, having to pack up and ship back. Like I don't know. I mean, obviously, the more you learn about shipping, the less likely, I dare I say out loud, we haven't had a breakage in a very long time and all of the mugs we're constantly shipping. But still, it's still kind of nerve-wracking to have to like send a whole batch of work somewhere and then you're hoping it sells. And if it doesn't sell, both of you are having to keep track of inventory back and forth and like all of this. It's complicated.
It is complicated. Yeah. And adding that extra element, I can see why the previous owners didn't want to do that. It makes more sense to bring in other people.
That makes sense. Is there something that you feel like is kind of the hallmark of great relation? Like if somebody's reaching out to you to be like, I would love to be represented by Good Earth. I want to work with you guys. I love the work you're already showing. Is there something that is kind of a green flag for you of like, hey, this is going to be somebody we enjoy working with, or even, people you already have that you're like, this is what makes a great partnership between an artist and a gallery?
I think what makes a great partnership is people who are enthusiastic and they care. Some people have a tendency to, I guess some people kind of aren't as excited about it. Like that's great, I'm there, but then they don't keep track of what their inventory is. Like I send a report every month with someone's check, but some people maybe get the report and until I say, I need you to restock, they don't send me new work. Whereas other people, they're on it, they come in and then check, or they ask for a photo of their display, or and every time they restock, they promote it. They say, hey, I bring in new work into Good Earth Pottery this week. And that is good for everybody. If people show they care and they're enthusiastic and they do their part, because it is a symbiotic relationship when you work with a gallery. You both have to do it. You can't just drop it off and expect to do nothing. You still have to do a little bit.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense. I was going to ask what red flags are, but I think it's obvious because it's just the opposite of everything you just said.
Yeah. If someone doesn't restock, if I ask over and over and over again, eventually I'm going to say this isn't working, because empty displays don't sell very much work. If it's not here, I can't sell it. So that's one of my catchphrases. But also, yeah, If a display goes stale or stagnant, it just does. Even no matter how you try to rearrange it, there becomes a vibe and people stop paying attention to it.
That
So
was the next thing I was thinking because you talked a little bit about, you know, we were joking about dusting, but obviously that is a very real need, but also just to the art of understanding how to build a display, I
Mhm.
think is probably an entire podcast episode onto itself that we could have
Yeah.
because there really is an art to, I mean, this is why people specialize in curation. Like it's amazing what can happen depending upon how you show something, right?
Mhm. Absolutely. It can be too empty. It can be too full. It's like the Goldilocks shelf, right? Just right.
Well, and do you feel like you guys change displays on season too? Like different colors sell better during different times of the year, or I don't know.
Not that so much, but, like, we have our I don't know if you've seen the photos of the gallery, but the front window display is really it's like all windows. So every month we have a featured show in the front windows, and I always try to pick something in that case that's a little bit more seasonally appropriate.
That makes sense. So, how frequently are you guys changing things?
Usually monthly. The front window display is usually a month-long feature just because that gives people a chance to build up their body of work, bring it in, and then have more people come and see it. I tried doing it more frequently, and that was really a poor idea.
I thought a month was already fast. So, to imagine doing it quicker than that, I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. No,
Let's do
for you.
3-week shows. No, that didn't work. Mm-mm.
So, so you started co ownership in 2016, and then you are full owner in 2019.
Mhm.
Obviously, COVID happens and who knows what. But in my effort to not only talk about the gallery, I'm going to jump past that small event. And when did you open this co-working community studio? I forget how you described it.
It's not a community, it's a shared private studio. There are 6 ceramic artists working in here, no, 5 ceramic artists, and then a painter/tattoo artist. We're also planning to have classes every now and then, like workshops. I'm in conversations with some people that I'm not gonna share names with yet, that I'm going to invite to Bellingham to do some workshops.
Awesome.
I've just moved into it at the end of January, so it's very new. It's called Starflower Studios.
How was trying to find a space?
Well, it all came together miraculously. It's like it was just meant to happen. I was wood firing one night talking to someone on my crew, and Isla, Isla Mullen? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Francesco does. I've
Yes.
never actually met her personally, but Francesco knows her from she, I think, came to the same studio he was working at in Italy.
Yeah, so Isla lives here in Bellingham. She's a good friend, and she's on my wood firing crew. So we were working together, and we were on shift, and we were talking about her studio space. And since I guess it's been 10 years ago, I put in a tiny little shed in my backyard. And I was working in a space that was about 80 square feet, tiny. And I always thought, well, this is here. I'm stuck here. I never thought about it. And then we were talking about the space she was renting, and it got the wheels turning in my head that I wanted. I was like, oh, you know what? I could do that too. I don't have to work in my tiny little shed. So I started looking for spaces. And the first one that I looked at wasn't a good fit, but the property manager said, well, what exactly are you looking for? And I told her, and she's like, I have the perfect spot for you. And she sent me some photos of it. And she's like, we can tear out the carpet. We can take out the reception desk because this used to be a law office. And I didn't know that they would do all that stuff. And I got here and I just had this moment and I got choked up and teary. And the property manager I never met before, we were hugging each other like, oh my gosh, this can happen. I feel like a lot of my pottery life has been like that. So it all worked out. I found the perfect people to share this bigger space. I don't have kilns here on site because I live so close. I have solar at home, so my kilns are on solar power, so it's nice to have that less expensive electricity. So I just drive my stuff to my home to bisque fire, and then I finish it in my wood kiln or other wood kilns. So I could have kilns here,
And
but I just decided not to do that yet.
I was going to say, are the other potters sharing the space then just driving their stuff to kiln shares or different things like that?
Yes, I fire work for one of the people in the studio, and then the other 3 share a kiln of their own somewhere else. So it all worked out for everybody. It's perfect.
That's wild. And also, I hope more spaces like this start existing because what we're finding is it's really hard to find a workspace. Not just there's a ton of beautiful community studios where you can meet other people, you can learn from other people, But as soon as you start getting into like a very small amount of production, community studios aren't built for production. And that's to be expected. Like, that's not what they're there for. But, if you need more than 1 to 2 shelf spaces, it's like, okay, well, how can I do this? And then if you're trying to do it on your own, the overhead of it is, just nonsensical.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I couldn't do this by myself, but because I'm sharing it with these other people, it works out great. And now I can actually walk across the room and opposed to just turning around to do stuff in my studio space. So I'm getting a little bit more steps in.
Yeah, but if you would have kept this upstairs studio, then you would have had to carry, you would have gotten the weightlifting and the steps in the
This is true, but it really was not fun. And you know what? That studio was not much larger than the one in my backyard. It was a small studio because the studios in the building where Good Earth is, it used to be a special hotel. So they're all small rooms above a tavern. Yeah.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay, the history of this whole building also deserves its own podcast episode because that's amazing.
It does.
Also, the way you said special hotel makes me think it also used to be a brothel, just saying.
It's exactly what I meant. Yeah. That's a special hotel.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, yep.
I just like to keep it up to the imagination.
I was like, I'm pretty sure I know what that means. This has nothing to do with clay and nothing to do with anything, but in the city of Chicago, there is still a law on the books, or at least there was when I was in college 20 years ago, that more than 9 women living together in the same house is legally a brothel. And I lived in a intentional community space one year in college where there was 8 of us and 2 guys, and so we nicknamed ourselves One Short of a Brothel. Good times.
Yeah.
Good times.
What a funny law.
Yeah. I'm assuming it's a holdover from like prohibition or something. There's all sorts out there. Chicago is not unique in that. But anyway, like I said, has nothing to do with anything. But that's where my brain went. So here we are. So this new shared space then was really a matter of you finding a space for your own making practice and making it kind of viable to do for yourself with other people together, as opposed to yet another business to manage.
Yes, except I still want to do a little bit of businessy stuff here.
Like hosting, why we get along. This is why we are so the same.
I like to teach, so I would like to teach workshops here now and then. And like I said, I want to bring in some guest artists from other places. There's plenty of space here for someone to come do a hand building workshop, or I have a few wheels in here. And one of the people who's moving into the space is a glaze expert. He'd like to do some glaze workshops with people. So it's a good spot for that.
Nice. When you mentioned that when you started in the co-op with Good Earth, you weren't in pottery at that time. Where does that fall in the timeline of all of these things going on?
So that was 2009. I started working there just with my sales and marketing experience. And then I don't know if it was like 6 months in, or maybe less than that, I took some classes at the community college in throwing. And then in 2011, I took a workshop in coil building, and I got so hooked on that, I sold my wheel that I had bought, and then I coil built for over a decade, only coil building and some slab building. So that was my thing. And then a few years ago, I got back into throwing. So now I'm doing both, and also trying to do throwing and coiling, like combining the two things together. I don't do the traditional coil building where you blend it all and you can see all my coils. So it's all about the texture and designs.
As you talk about your work, the only thing in my brain is just little owl faces looking at me. I just picture the owls.
That was the moment. The first time I drew an owl with the coils is the moment I knew that I had found my voice in clay. That was it. Like, it was a special moment.
That's really interesting. What were you making before the owls? Or what was kind of like, what were you like, I'm going to try and make an owl?
Well, but when I took the coil building workshop, I took it from a local artist named Patricia Morse, and it was her thing. And so she taught me her special coil building technique. And I wanted to be sure that I took what I learned from her and grew with it. So I wasn't just recreating what she did, because I think that's something we all fall into when we're learning new things. So I was like, how could I use the coils in a way that are different from Patricia so that people will know that I'm my own artist? And I just started, playing around. I'm using my hands while I'm talking. Can you see that? I'm getting ready to start coiling here. But I just started playing around a little bit, and I thought, oh, what if I draw a picture? So And I love owls. I have a connection with owls. I've had a lot of magical owl encounters, and my grandma Olson loved owls, and it's just a big part of who I am. No pun intended.
Oh gosh, I hadn't even. Oh, the pun is totally intended. 100%. Title of the episode right there. Who I am.
So, yes, I drew an owl. You're losing my
My bad. My bad.
right. Yeah, so I started drawing this owl, and the way that I work in reverse. So I'm doing everything backwards, which I know it's hard to it's kinda like block printing in a way. Like, I draw the whole thing, and then I smooth out the back, and then I flip it over to see how it turned out. And once I flip it over and, see the owl that I created, I was like, "Ah." It was just that moment. I'm like, "Okay, this is it. Get rid of the wheel. I'm just gonna draw things with coils."
And that was what, almost 14 years ago.
Yes, it was.
Do you feel like this style has shifted very much over time, or that excitement around it is just still there and still going strong?
It has shifted, and I did take a little break from it for a while I was working on learning how to throw. But lately, I've been doing more. Have you seen my snake pieces that I've been posting on media?
I have not seen the snake piece, but to be fair, I have also not been on social nearly as much as I used to be, which we're gonna count as a good thing, but then also it means I miss. But maybe the social media algorithms know that snakes and I don't get along.
But so I've been adding extra clay to bring them more, give them more dimension. Because what I've been doing, because I work in reverse, everything is very flat, even though it's textured. It's flat texture. So now, after I flip it over, I add on more clay. So the snakes are coming off of the piece. I have one over here. Do you want me to grab it and show it to you?
Great, more alive snakes, just exactly what I want to see.
Oh, come on.
Listen, I'm the girl, as much as I love the farm in the Midwest, I'm the girl who gets scared of garter snakes. Like, I can do flat snakes. Those actually look very, like, sincere and tender. I'm not going to pet them anytime soon, but they look really nice.
As you can see, they've got
Two different clay bodies, too, or is it just the...
it is, yes. This is green so it's not fired yet. So it's gonna be wood fired. So each snake will be a different color after it's fired.
Nice.
So
That's super cool. All right, this could gradually get me into being more comfortable with snakes. It's going to be a long process, but we'll get there. That was the one thing about when we went to Australia that I was very relieved we happened to it just worked with schedules that we wound up going in their autumn. So late April. And so, we didn't get nearly the experience of all of the various. We got to see kangaroos in the wild, but I didn't have to see any extremely large snakes or spiders. Spiders I'm okay with, but then when people talk about them being the size of your face, I'm like, am I okay with them? I don't know.
I did see one that was probably about that big.
Yeah.
But none of the dinner plate sized ones.
No, thank you. What I'm curious about too is, with basically this passion coming in adulthood and then also having all of these various parts, how pragmatically it works with your life, to kind of manage it sounds like getting involved in the gallery was kind of a natural progression of experience you already had going on, but then setting up everything else around it and being in a place like the Seattle area in Bellingham and making it work within the confinements of what that lifestyle looks like and all of the rest of it.
Mhm. Well, I started out, only working a couple days a week in the gallery, and then started taking the classes, and then we met all these wonderful people, and all my friends are clay people. Seriously, it's like my besties are all the clay people around me. But as far as I got the studio in the building that I was in for a while, and then I realized one day I got home. Because I was in my studio or I'd be in the gallery. And sometimes I'd be in my studio upstairs and they'd call me to come downstairs to help with something in the gallery. So I was there all the time. And one day I got home and I sat in my car in front of my house and I just looked at it and was like, I feel like I'm never here. So that's why I decided to put in a studio at home so that I would be more accessible to my family. So I could still continue making my work and my kids can run out back and, be there and hang out with me if they wanted to. And then it's been about trying to make conscious effort to be available. And part of the reason I moved my studio, this is funny, I moved my studio here now away from my home is so that I can set boundaries, so that I can work in my studio and okay, it's time for me to go home. And I stop and I go home because then I got back into that trap of always being in my studio. Like, I'm just gonna finish this piece, and everyone's had dinner, right? So
Yeah.
just I wanted, my eldest daughter has moved out, so she's not home all the time, but she works for me and she's in my studio, so I see her all the time. And my other child is a high school senior, so I need to be there for them, but they also, they like to do their own thing. So it's just making the choices. Yeah, navigating it.
I was just thinking those are a lot of different life phases also to where, depending on whatever phase you're in, then the need changes in terms of being able to make work at home and be available when kids are younger because they can entertain themselves, but they maybe are too young to be at home by themselves entirely or like
Right.
use the stove by themselves or something like that. As opposed to, okay, now they're busy on their own and can drive and whatever. And now it needs to be a place of like separate, like when I'm home, I'm home. And when I'm at work, I'm at work.
Right. Exactly. Especially too, with taking on the cohorts role, I'm also doing computer work all the time for doing cohorts management. So like I got Wi-Fi in my studio. So now it's also going to be my office. So I can work here and then go home and just be home. Maybe, or I'll be on the couch working on my computer watching a movie with family, which happens a lot. I I am trying to make a point of not working all the time. I'm getting better at that, but it is hard.
We can be each other's accountability buddies.
Sitting still and doing nothing feels really weird.
I can do it sort of in the summer outside in the sun.
Mhm.
That is when I can just sit and enjoy the sun on my face and watch the dog roll around in the grass like a goofball. And I can do that. Any other time of the year, indoors, absolutely not. Forget it. Outside, maybe yes, sort of. But yeah.
I just took up basket weaving. So now I can basket weave at home. So my hands are still busy, but I'm hanging out with my family at the same time. And not
Precisely. I picked back up crochet this weekend because I'm like, I can sit on the couch and watch TV, but not feel guilty about it because at the end of it, I have a blanket.
exactly.
We might have a problem.
No, we're just kindred spirits.
Right. 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 I love it. Oh, you mentioned cohorts, and I wanted to get to that also because I think for a lot of people, it could be easy to assume that as connected as you are to the clay community, that it started from, undergrad or college or, there's a lot of stories we can tell ourselves to say like, oh, well, this person had this or did this or started so much longer before I did. And that's how they are doing all of these things. And so it's interesting for me to think about like, okay, you're in the Pacific Northwest, which is not, you're easily accessible to the West Coast for sure. But then for cohorts, Simon's in Illinois, which is completely, so I'm curious kind of how you got involved in the clay community on the larger scale. And then with cohorts as someone who picked this up from community classes and as an adult. And now it's, obviously now it's the whole life, but I hope that made sense. My questions are not real clear today.
I got it. Well, getting into the clay community, I discovered how much I loved the community, the people in clay. And I went to NCECA in 2012 and I only went for one day, but that was amazing. And then in 2016, I went in Kansas City and that started me connecting with people. And after that, I'm going to NCECA every year from now on, which I have, except for, during COVID. But yeah, so NCECA and then wood fire conferences. That's where I met Simon. So we kept crossing paths at woodfire conferences. And I think the third time we crossed paths was in North Carolina. And we got to know each other pretty well there and became friends. And I went out and fired the second firing of his Thunder train after he moved to Illinois. And so we became good friends. And then when he started cohorts, Amy Song was one of the cohorts. So, I was hearing about cohorts from her and from him, and he was all excited about it. And I was like, what we should do is we should have an annual exhibit at Good Earth Pottery. So to celebrate their achievements. So we started offering that. And then as we were getting ready to get ready for that show and Simon decided he wanted to expand on the program, then he asked if I wanted to be the manager to help him do the stuff he doesn't like to do. And it's true. He'll say it.
Yeah. I was going to say, it sounds like my other half with our clay, our ceramics business.
We all have our strengths, right? So,
We do, but this is where you and I again are kindred spirits because just because our strengths are computer based doesn't mean our goal is to always be on the computer. I just need this publicly on the record for both
yeah.
of us.
Well, I'll tell you what, when it comes to Zoom, I'm terrible. I still have a terrible time with it. I'll get ready to set up something and then my computer crashes. I'm like, bye, everybody. I can do all sorts of computer things, but something about Zoom and I do not mesh.
Maybe that's more Zoom and less you. I don't know. We can dig into
I
that.
don't know.
But yeah.
But yeah, so basically, wood firing. My real love in clay is wood firing. I learned how to wood fire. I was introduced to it in 2013 and I was completely hooked. And then I started doing everything I could to do wood firing things. So I went to conferences. I went to the Wabansie Wood Fire Conference. That was the first time I met Simon. And that's where I met Amy Song. And then I just would travel to all the conferences and get to know the people who loved wood firing because I really, it's my thing.
Which I imagine for many people who have ever done it. I mean, the first time I ever did it was with Sandy Lockwood at La Meridiana during that residency. And we had I didn't even have that many great pots come out of the kiln. And I'm saying that like categorically, not personally. We had some really cold spots. Things were underfired. They had to be refired. Whatever. You had a group of 10 people, most of whom had never done it before, who got given a bit of free reign to try and make it work. So no surprise. And yet I still love it.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't even entirely about the results. You want great results, but at the same time, it was still like, this is fun. I'm exhausted, but this is fun.
Yeah, it's that shared experience and the people you get to know and the bonding that you have. Like the friendships that I built around the wood kiln are amazing. I used to be scared of fire. And now I'm reaching into it. And people are like, don't put your hand in the kiln. But yeah, so the wood firing is what really, I think, helped me build my community. I also joined the Washington Clay Arts Association and I became part of the board member on that. And I started a local clay organization called Whatcom Artists of Clay and Kiln. WAC is what we call ourselves. So we started that about 11 years ago as a way to just build that clay community because that was something I noticed that so many people coming into Good Earth were hungry for people because they all had their separate studios. So they were never socializing that much. So we started WAC so that the local people could get together, just talk about clay with people who would understand it. So their partners would be like, this again, they had other people to talk to. Maybe I needed that. No.
I mean, that's hilarious that that's the example you give because there have been more than one member of our online community who has said like, I think my partner is so thrilled I've joined because now I have people who I can like, I don't have to feel bad about how long I'm talking about clay when I'm, logged in and we're all either even just like writing comments or whatever. Like you can just go to town for as long as you want rather than having to exhaust your friends and family.
I will say that my husband is extremely supportive and loves clay too. Like he's appreciates what it has brought to my life. So he's not really.
Yes. But we also want to stay married. That is I still need to make good on this promise and we can figure this out that the idea that there should be an offshoot podcast for the partners of people in clay so that they can tell their stories.
I don't know. Do we want to hear it? No.
Right. Well, that's why I was like, maybe instead of me interviewing everyone, it should be like an offshoot thing where somebody else, like the partners have their own conversations because I don't know.
Just a fly on the wall, Andrea. No one's there.
Right.
Yeah.
I can just help produce. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. No, it's interesting to hear because, there is such a lot of times you can get into the conversations of, somebody went to whatever school and whatever residency and this, that, and the other. But for those of us that found this love of the medium, after college or in adulthood, it's like, wait, what does this trajectory look like for me? And how do I make it work in the life that already exists? You're not necessarily going to pick up and leave your home to go for a 1-year residency somewhere. I mean, maybe you are, whatever. That's between you and your family, but probably not.
3 weeks in Australia was good. It was a long time.
Right. And so that's what's interesting to me because you're also working at a level different than side hustling or, very serious hobbyist or what, it has become the whole life, but there was already life and responsibilities and whatever there to begin with that had to work around that.
Right. Yeah, I guess I shouldn't say clay became my whole life, 'cause it just became a
Yeah.
significant portion of it because my family is my life too.
Helps you wedge. No. Oh, shoot. Yeah, do you feel like in terms of the potters who are finding this within their adulthood and figuring out how to fit it in around the life they already have, but want to take it more seriously, want to accelerate, what's the right description? I don't know, just advance their skills and go to the next levels that you would normally get out of a traditional MFA program or residency or whatnot. Obviously, cohorts is a huge opportunity to have that experience virtually, but are there other ways also in tandem with that you found for yourself? I mean, before cohorts even existed, you were
Mhm.
figuring this out.
I think I was really fortunate that I live in a place that is so rich in clay community. I mean, Good Earth started in 1969, and it started out as a cooperative studio space before it became gallery only. So a lot of people got their start there, and then just like that love of clay is very active in the Bellingham area and the Seattle area. But I know that there are people out there who don't have that, and that does make it more challenging. So the online options like cohorts are really helpful for that.
Well, this would be the obvious segue then. Explain to people who haven't ever heard of clay cohorts what the heck we're talking about.
Well, we are actually called Cohort Stop now, not clay cohorts, because we have
Oh.
expanded and we're going to continue expanding into other art mediums. So this year, we not only have clay artist mentors, but we also have jewelry artist mentor, metals and enameling. And we're hoping to grow into other forms like woodworking or fiber, writing, 2D. So there's lots of opportunity there. So yeah, we switched from clay cohorts to cohorts.art. But it is an online mentorship program where you are a group of artists, about 5 or 6 artists, are matched with a mentor, and the artists get to meet with their mentor twice a month for an hour on Zoom, and then they meet once a month as a whole cohort with their mentor, and then at some point during the year, they all get together for a one-week in-person workshop. So not only is there that online component, but there's also the in-person moment where everyone really gets to know each other, and they might fire a wood kiln, they might tour galleries, they might make things. There's all sorts of different opportunities. There are 12 mentors this year, so each mentor has a different strength and different studio offering for the students. And it's relational learning, and it's curated towards what the students want. It's not a packaged curriculum. Every year is different. Every cohort is different because each individual person has different goals. So the mentors work with the students for that.
That reminds me of like almost an independent study route in traditional academia where you kind of have this professor who's mentoring you, but you've dictated the curriculum of, okay, I'm going to do I don't know, a master's program or a thesis in something. And so then you're going deep down that rabbit hole, but with the guidance of a mentor.
Yeah, it's very much like that. But it's nice because it is online. It's more accessible to people who have kids or have a job and they can't commit to going back to school or doing a year-long residency. There's so much more flexibility there and to meet people where they're at.
Do you have a lot of people who are working within like the confines of a community studio doing cohorts, or is it a lot of people who have built their own home studio or kind of different working access?
We have both. Yeah, as long as they have access to regular access to a studio and a kiln, it works out fine.
Cool. I'm going to take a right turn because there's something I wanted to circle back on when you were talking about attending conferences as the way of helping build your community.
Mhm.
Is there something in particular, because I know this will air after NCECA, but it will still be very much fresh to people's minds, I think. Conferences are amazing, but they're also this really intense kind of pressure cooker of 3 or 4 days that all-consuming. I tend to lose my voice because I don't drink enough water and I'm talking all day long and in loud situations. And then it's almost like a shock to the system because then all of a sudden you return home, right?
Mhm.
And it's this intensity and then it's gone, which can be, really depressing. It can be really sad because you've had this like huge high point and then you're like, whoa, okay, hold on a second. Now what do I do with all of this? The point I'm trying to get to is was there something that you feel like you did after conferences to maintain those connections and grow those relationships in between?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely people that I've connected with at the conferences that I follow up with, to maybe have to work at a show at Good Earth, just messaging people through social media and emailing. Yeah, I definitely make the effort to get to know people better when I connect with them at the conferences. What's also weird for me is to go to a conference and meet artists that I've worked with, but I've never met before.
Oh, yeah.
So that's been, or like walking along and like people recognizing me from Instagram. That's been a weird. It's really nice, lovely, but it's a little startling sometimes when someone comes up to me and starts talking to me like they know me. Like, who are you? Or no, I mean, it's really great to meet you finally. Yeah. I've had artists come up and like throw their arms around me that I've never met before, but they were so excited to have had work in my gallery or worked with me. And it's been lovely. But it is overwhelming. I get tired. And I also feel like I have to behave myself because people know who I am. I say that. Not that I wouldn't behave myself, but I feel a little bit on the, I'm representing my gallery. I'm representing cohorts. I want to.
Yeah, you're there in a different capacity now. Yeah. Even before you owned Good Earth, because I feel like it sounded to me like especially with the Woodfire conferences, that was kind of integral to kind of expanding your network and your personal community of support and fellow makers. Was there something even before you had the kind of hat of gallery owner on that was it just through social media that you stayed in touch with people outside of conferences, or was there kind of some, I don't know, because I think a lot of people are nervous about reaching out after they've met someone. Like you've had this great connection in this great moment, and then somewhere between that convention center and landing back home, the nerves come back of like, oh, well, I don't want to bother them, or, oh, we did connect, but now it's been a week and I forgot to reach out, and,
Mhm.
all these stories we tell ourselves.
It's hard to look back on it now because social media wasn't quite as much of a thing when I first started getting into wood firing. It was really just starting to roll out then. So a lot of it probably it was more about, once going back to a conference, like, oh, I remember meeting you last year. So there maybe wasn't a lot of that in between connection time. I think I started it more after going to the Wabansie Woodfire Conference. I guess that was the first time I'd gone to a conference outside of NCECA. It was so specialized. So it was a smaller conference. So it was meeting more people, focusing on that one topic, and it was a smaller group. So it helped build that connection a little bit. I met Amy Song at that conference, and then we hung out at the Portland and Sika. We reached out through Facebook, and we're like, okay, let's go hang out at Portland and Sika. And then after that, we're like, let's go to North Carolina together. We got a hotel room together. We hardly knew each other. That's when I think I started coming out of my shell, because I think I used to be really more reserved. I've come a long way from how I used to be, and it feels natural now, but I can't picture what it was like before. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I'm laughing because conferences are this weird, they're wonderful, they're amazing, but they're also such a weird shift in social behavior in terms of the first conference I ever went to was for photography, was 2010 in New Orleans. I hadn't even officially decided I was going to start a business. I had come home from this year of volunteer work in England. I hadn't gotten a job in graphic design. I photographed my cousin's wedding and was like, oh, right. I have this skill. I worked with this wedding photographer in college. I could do this thing. So all of a sudden I found a conference. But I was straight out of college. I hadn't made any money. So in order to get myself to this conference, I needed to do everything as cheap as possible. So I posted in what was it at the time? It wasn't a blog. Oh, it was a forum at the time, because social, like Facebook was the thing, but that was about it. I posted in a forum, or I answered someone's post about looking for a roommate who was attending this conference. We had never talked at all. And I just shared this room with another woman in New Orleans. Totally normal. It was fine. Everybody lived. Nobody was weird. But it was like, when else in life would you ever do that except for a conference?
Yeah. I've shared hotel rooms at NCECA with 6 people. You've got like 2 people in each bed and 2 on the floor you're trying not to step on, and it's really interesting.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But it does bond you for life.
Absolutely. Or
100%.
or not. No.
There's no middle. It's one or the other. 100%. I love it. That's amazing. Well, I feel like we barely scratched the surface. I know I went down quite the rabbit hole on the gallery for a long time. So is there something that we haven't touched upon that you feel like you wish people knew or that I didn't ask?
I don't think so. I feel like we covered a lot. I mean, yeah, the gallery was a big part of the topic, but that is a big part of who I am. It is why I am who I am. If it hadn't been for Good Earth, I wouldn't be here at Starflower Studios, surrounded by my pottery, So
That's amazing.
it's all from that.
Well, I mean, that's the most full circle end to the story talk about good storytelling right there. Like, that's the strongest end to an episode I can possibly think of.
I majored in creative writing.
Oh, there we go. You should be helping me with this. Like, I shouldn't have been asking the questions. I should have just let you go.
No, it's better this way. I'm glad that I got to answer your questions and follow your brain the way it works like mine. It's great.
Scary. It must be the curls. It does something to us.
Our brains are pearly too.
Oh my God. Before I forget, since you have all of this stuff going on, where should we send people on the internet to see what you're up to?
Well, all of my websites, that sounds awful. Some of my websites have links to all of my websites. So goodearthpots.com, AnnMarieCooper.com, cohorts.art. Those are all the links. You can find those things. The Starflower Studios information can be found on AnnMarieCooper.com.
Fabulous. We will link it in the show notes. I hope this conversation with AnnMarie has given you a helpful reminder that our creative paths are not always linear. However, each stage of our making and personal life has its own purpose and lessons. Not to mention that pivoting isn't always a response to something being wrong. And if you couldn't tell, I just used air quotes there. But instead, simply that change is a constant reality of our lives. Moving to a backyard studio shed for AnnMarie was an intentional choice in balancing family needs and her own personal creative desires, exactly the same as moving out of that backyard studio shed has been. Not because one is better than the other or one signifies some kind of level of success over the other. No. First and foremost, the decision to change has been driven by what AnnMarie wanted or needed for her personal life. Put a shorter way that you've heard me say before, if you've been listening to any solo episodes here on the podcast, decide on your life first. And then figure out how to build your creative business around it. It sounds obvious, but let me tell you, as someone who's learned that lesson the hard way, it's a lot easier to let the business dictate the life. And it takes a heck of a lot of intention to make sure your life is dictating your business. As always, if you're looking for support navigating the constant nature of change in your own life and making practice, there are 100 other makers having these conversations inside of the community right now. We have members at every stage, some working part-time from kitchen tables, some from backyard or basement studios, some full-timers from separate studio spaces entirely, all figuring out what version of this creative making life works best for their specific personal lives. If you want to learn more about community membership and how joining supports the creation of this very podcast in the process, visit makersplaybook.com/community to learn more. This quarter, we're discussing all things SEO, or search engine optimization. The recordings of our 2 masterclasses, one specifically about Etsy and another one about SEO on a broader scale, that kicked everything off, have already been posted so you can watch them whenever it works for you and jump into the conversation at whatever point suits you. Or dive back into last quarter's conversation about financial systems if that's more urgent for you right now. Or frankly, dive back into any of the past masterclasses and conversations. Because as you might have picked up from any of these podcast interviews, The conversations never truly end, after all. All right, my friends, until next time, go get back to making your dreams a reality, because together, we've got this. Audio post-production of this podcast is made possible by help from Christy Kotzfan, with promotional material assistance from Queenie Maliki. The Maker's Playbook podcast is recorded on the original homelands of the Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee people, where the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present.